8-year-old solves murder that stumped police for years. What she found will shock you. What if I told you that an 8-year-old girl accomplished what an entire police department couldn't? That while seasoned detectives closed a case and walked away, a child with an extraordinary mind refused to accept their convenient lies. Emma Martinez was just 8 when her father was murdered outside his law office. The police quickly arrested a maintenance worker, the case was closed, and everyone moved on. Everyone except Emma. Armed with an IQ of 180, and her father's final words echoing in her mind, "Pay attention to details others might miss." This remarkable child began an investigation that would expose a conspiracy reaching the highest levels of power. What she discovered in those crime scene photos, what she found in financial records, and how she connected dots that trained professionals had missed, will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about justice. This is the true story of how one determined child brought down an empire of corruption. The phone rang 3 times before Emma heard her father's familiar voice, though something was different tonight. Even at 8 years old, Emma Martinez possessed an extraordinary ability to detect the subtle nuances in people's voices, a gift that would prove both blessing and curse in the years to come. "Hi, Daddy," Emma chirped into the cordless phone, curled up in her favorite reading chair with a stack of advanced mathematics textbooks that most high schoolers would find challenging. "Hey there, my brilliant little scientist," David Martinez replied, but his usual warmth was tempered by an undertone of exhaustion and something else. Worry, perhaps? "What are you working on tonight?" Emma glanced at the open pages before her. "I'm reading about probability theory and statistical analysis. Did you know that the chance of getting struck by lightning is approximately 1 in a million, but most people overestimate the risk because of availability bias?" Despite whatever was troubling him, David chuckled. "You never cease to amaze me, Emma. Your mind works in ways that make me so proud." "Daddy, you sound tired. Are you still at the office?" Emma asked, her keen perception picking up on the background sounds, the hum of fluorescent lights, the distant rumble of late-night traffic, the echo that came from speaking in a large, empty building. "Yes, sweetheart, I'm working on something very important." Remember how we talked about standing up honest with her about his work, explaining complex legal concepts in ways her advanced mind could grasp? David paused, and Emma could hear papers shuffling. Some powerful people have been taking money that doesn't belong to them and hurting others to keep their secrets. Tomorrow I'm going to tell the truth about what they've done. That's good, right? Truth is always better than lies. It is, Emma. But sometimes when you tell the truth about powerful people doing bad things, those people get very upset. They might try to stop you from telling the truth. Emma frowned, processing this information with the analytical precision that set her apart from other children. "Are you in danger, Daddy?" Another pause, longer this time. "Emma, remember what I always tell you about doing the right thing? That sometimes doing what's right is hard, and sometimes it's scary, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't do it." Emma recited the words her father had spoken to her countless times. "That's my girl. And remember, no matter what happens, I love you more than all the stars in the universe. I love you more than all the atoms in existence," Emma replied with their traditional response. "Listen, sweetheart, I promise we'll go to the Science Museum this weekend. They have a new exhibit on forensic science that I think you'd find fascinating. We can learn about how detectives solve mysteries using evidence and logic." Emma's eyes lit up. "Really? Can we see how they analyze DNA and fingerprints?" "Absolutely. We'll make a whole day of it. But right now, I need you to get some sleep, okay? And Emma?" "Yes, Daddy. I want you to remember something important. If anything ever happens to me, I need you to use that brilliant mind of yours. Pay attention to details that others might miss. Ask questions that others might not think to ask. Can you promise me that?" The request struck Emma as oddly specific, and a chill ran down her spine. "Daddy, you're scaring me." "I'm sorry, sweetheart. I don't mean to scare you. I just want you to know how special you are, and how proud I am of the way you see things that others don't notice. That gift of yours, your ability to analyze and understand patterns, it's going to be very important someday. Okay, Daddy, I promise. And then we can all relax together. But Emma's exceptional mind had already begun cataloging the inconsistencies, the tension in her father's voice, the unusual nature of his requests, the worry in her mother's eyes. She didn't know it yet, but this would be the last conversation she would ever have with her father, and every word of it was now permanently etched in her extraordinary memory. That night, as Emma lay in bed staring at the ceiling, she couldn't have imagined that her father's final gift to her, his encouragement to pay attention and ask the right questions, would become the foundation for a quest that would consume the next 5 years of her life, and ultimately expose a conspiracy that reached the highest levels of power in their city. Detective Sarah Foster had seen her share of crime scenes in 15 years of police work, but something about the call that came in at 11:47 p.m. made her stomach tighten with dread. David Martinez, the civil rights attorney who had been making waves with his high-profile cases against police misconduct and corporate corruption, had been found dead outside his law office. As Foster's unmarked sedan pulled into the parking lot of the Meridian Plaza business complex, the scene that greeted her was already chaotic. Red and blue lights painted the surrounding buildings in alternating waves of color, while uniformed officers worked to establish a perimeter. The media had arrived with unseemly speed, their satellite trucks and camera crews pushing against the police tape like vultures circling carrion. Foster's partner for this investigation wasn't human. Titan, a magnificent German shepherd with an impeccable service record, sat alertly in the passenger seat, his dark eyes scanning the scene with professional intensity. The 7-year-old dog had been Foster's partner for 3 years, and their connection had evolved into something approaching telepathy. "Let's see what we're dealing with, boy," Foster murmured as she clipped Titan's lead to his collar. The moment they stepped out of the car, Titan's demeanor changed. His ears perked forward, his nostrils flared, and every muscle in his powerful frame went taut with attention. Foster had learned to read these signs. Titan had detected something significant. Officer Patricia Valdez, the first responder, approached with her preliminary report. Victim is David Martinez, 42 years old, prominent civil rights attorney. Examine the scene more carefully. The positioning is wrong, too. If someone attacked him here, where are the defensive wounds? Where are the signs of a struggle? Titan strained against his lead, pulling toward the far edge of the parking lot. Foster had learned to trust her partner's instincts completely. The dog's nose could detect scents that were days old and follow trails that human investigators would never notice. "What is it, Titan?" Foster asked, allowing the dog to lead her away from the immediate crime scene. Titan's nose led them across the parking lot, past several expensive cars, toward a storm drain near the property's edge. The scent trail seemed to continue beyond the parking lot, heading in the direction of the affluent Riverside business district, where the city's most powerful corporations had their headquarters. As they searched the area around the storm drain, Titan suddenly sat and looked up at Foster, his trained signal that he had found something important. Foster pulled out her flashlight and examined the ground carefully. Partially hidden beneath some fallen leaves, she spotted something that made her pulse quicken. An expensive-looking button, the kind that would come from a custom-tailored suit. "Good boy, Titan," she whispered, carefully photographing the button's position before collecting it in an evidence bag. The button was distinctive, mother-of-pearl with an intricate silver design that suggested it came from a very expensive garment, far beyond the means of typical street criminals. Foster's radio crackled to life. "Detective Foster, this is dispatch. Chief Brennan wants to see you at the scene immediately. He's en route with the mayor and several city council members." Foster's jaw tightened. Political involvement this early in an investigation was never a good sign. She looked down at Titan, who was still focused on the scent trail leading away from the scene. "We're being pulled back to the political circus, aren't we, boy?" she muttered. By the time Chief Brennan arrived with the entourage of city officials, the crime scene had transformed into a media spectacle. Camera crews from 3 local news stations had set up their equipment, and reporters were already speculating about the implications of David Martinez's death for several high-profile cases he had been working on. "Foster," Chief Brennan called out, his voice carrying the unmistakable tone of a man under pressure. "What do we know so far?" "To be clear about something. This city cannot afford to have this case drag on indefinitely. David Martinez was involved in several controversial cases. We need answers quickly, and we need them to be the right answers." Foster felt a chill that had nothing to do with the night air. "Ma'am, with all due respect, investigations take time. If we rush to judgment—" "Detective," interrupted Councilman Robert Chen, "David Martinez was about to testify in a case that could cost this city millions in damages and seriously damage our relationships with key business partners. We need to ensure that this investigation doesn't become a circus that further damages the city's reputation." Foster glanced at the evidence bag containing the button, then at Titan, who was still alert and focused on the scent trail leading away from the scene. Every instinct she had developed over 15 years of police work was telling her that this case was more complex than it appeared, but the political pressure was already mounting. "I understand your concerns," Foster said carefully, "but my job is to follow the evidence wherever it leads. My partner here has detected a scent trail that leads away from the immediate crime scene toward the business district. We need to investigate." "Detective," Chief Brennan interrupted, "I think we need to focus on more obvious leads first. Let's canvass the area for witnesses, check security footage, and look at anyone who might have had a grudge against Mr. Martinez. There are plenty of obvious suspects without going on fishing expeditions." Foster looked down at Titan, whose intelligent eyes seemed to understand the frustration his partner was feeling. The dog's nose had led them to what could be crucial evidence, but politics was already threatening to derail a proper investigation. As the officials continued their discussion about media management and quick resolutions, Foster quietly slipped the evidence bag containing the button into her jacket pocket. Something told her that this small piece of evidence might be more important than anyone realized, and that if the investigation was going to be rushed for political reasons, she needed to ensure that crucial evidence wasn't overlooked in the scramble for quick answers. The media circus continued around them, but Foster's attention was focused on Titan, who remained alert and ready to follow the trail that could lead to the real truth about David Martinez's death. She had no way of knowing that 5 years later, an 8-year night before, her mother had been awake most of the night. Emma had heard her pacing in the hallway, and now there were official-sounding voices at their front door at an hour when most people were still asleep. Emma pressed her ear to her bedroom door, her exceptional hearing picking up fragments of the conversation downstairs. The words, "sorry for your loss," and "tragic incident" filtered through the floor, each phrase hitting her consciousness like physical blows. Her brilliant mind, capable of processing complex mathematical theorems and scientific principles far beyond her years, suddenly felt sluggish and unresponsive, as if a crucial circuit had been severed. When her mother called her downstairs 20 minutes later, Emma could see that Maria Martinez had been crying. Her mother's eyes were red and swollen, her usually perfect hair disheveled, and her hands trembled slightly as she reached out to embrace her daughter. "Mija," Maria said, her voice barely above a whisper, "I need to tell you something very sad. Your father, your daddy, won't be coming home anymore." Emma's first response was purely logical. "Did he have an accident? Is he in the hospital? What's his condition?" Maria's face crumpled. "No, sweetheart. He's gone. Someone hurt him very badly last night, and the doctors couldn't save him." The words seemed to hang in the air like a mathematical equation that refused to balance. Emma's mind, which had always been her greatest asset, suddenly felt like a computer trying to process incompatible data. The concept of her father's death was simultaneously too simple and too complex for her 8-year-old psyche to fully grasp. "But he promised we would go to the Science Museum this weekend," Emma said, her voice taking on a mechanical quality. "He promised to show me the forensic science exhibit. He said we would learn about how detectives solve mysteries using evidence and logic." Maria pulled Emma close, tears streaming down her face. "I know, baby. I know he promised. Your daddy always kept his promises when he could, but sometimes things happen that are beyond anyone's control." Over the next several hours, Emma's house filled with people, relatives, family friends, neighbors, and officials. Each person spoke in hushed tones and offered condolences that Emma's analytical mind found frustratingly vague and illogical. They spoke of God's plan, of tragic accidents, of random acts of violence received related to his work. Emma watched her mother's face carefully as she responded. "David never brought his work problems home. He said he wanted to protect us from that world." But Emma remembered her father's words from their last conversation. "Sometimes when you tell the truth about powerful people doing bad things, those people get very upset. They might try to stop you from telling the truth." "Detective Foster," Emma said suddenly, her clear voice cutting through the adult conversation. "My father told me last night that he was going to make some powerful people very unhappy. He said that sometimes people try to stop you from telling the truth." Foster's attention immediately focused on Emma. "Can you tell me exactly what he said, Emma? Try to remember his exact words." Emma closed her eyes, accessing the perfect recording of the conversation stored in her exceptional memory. "He said, 'Some powerful people have been taking money that doesn't belong to them and hurting others to keep their secrets. Tomorrow I'm going to tell the truth about what they've done.'" Foster made careful notes, but Emma noticed something troubling in the detective's expression, a flicker of frustration, as if she had heard information that confirmed suspicions she wasn't allowed to pursue. "Did your father mention any specific names or companies?" Foster asked. "He was going to testify about Meridian Construction," Emma replied. "He had been working on that case for months." Emma saw Foster exchange a meaningful look with her partner, but before the detective could ask follow-up questions, her phone rang. After a brief conversation, Foster's expression grew tense. "Mrs. Martinez, Emma, I'm sorry, but I need to cut this interview short. There have been some developments in the case that require my immediate attention." After Foster left, Emma retreated to her room and began what would become a 5-year obsession. She took out a notebook and began writing down everything she could remember about her father's final conversation, Detective Foster's questions, and the reactions of everyone who had visited their house. At the top of the first page she wrote, "Questions the adults aren't asking. Why didn't Detective Foster seem surprised when I mentioned Meridian Construction? Why did she have to leave suddenly after I mentioned it? If this was a random crime, why did..." But she would not. Her father had trained her to think analytically, to look for patterns, and to never accept easy answers to complex problems. She didn't know it yet, but her exceptional mind, the gift that made her different from other children, would become her most powerful weapon in seeking justice for her father. The same analytical abilities that helped her master advanced mathematics and scientific principles would soon be turned toward unraveling a conspiracy that the adult world had either missed or chosen to ignore. Emma Martinez, at 8 years old, had just begun her transformation from gifted child to determined detective. Her father's final lesson, that sometimes the most important truths are the ones that powerful people don't want you to discover, would guide her through the long, difficult journey ahead. The investigation that the authorities would soon close, Emma Martinez was just beginning to open. The emergency meeting convened in Chief Brennan's office at 7:30 a.m., less than 8 hours after David Martinez's body had been discovered. The room felt suffocating with tension as city officials crowded around the conference table, their faces grim with the kind of focused intensity that came when political careers hung in the balance. Detective Sarah Foster sat at the far end of the table, her preliminary case file spread before her, while Titan lay quietly at her feet. She had worked through the night, following up on the evidence they had collected, but every lead seemed to point toward uncomfortable truths that the assembled officials clearly didn't want to hear. Chief Brennan, a 25-year veteran of the force, looked haggard as he addressed the room. "Ladies and gentlemen, we all understand the gravity of this situation. David Martinez wasn't just any attorney. He was involved in cases that have significant implications for this city's reputation and financial stability." Mayor Patricia Hendricks leaned forward, her manicured fingers drumming impatiently on the polished wood surface. "Chief, I need to be absolutely clear about our expectations. The Martinez murder cannot become a prolonged media circus that drags this city's name through the mud. We need resolution, and we need it quickly." Councilman Robert Chen nodded emphatically. "The mayor is absolutely right. Martinez was set to testify next week in the Riverside development case. His accusations against Meridian Construction have already cost the city 3 major development contracts. We cannot allow his death to become a platform for more unfounded takes. David Martinez made a lot of enemies with his reckless accusations against respected businesses and city institutions. We should focus on those who had personal grudges against him, not chase shadows that could damage innocent reputations." Foster felt her jaw tighten, but she pressed forward. "Ma'am, the evidence suggests this wasn't a personal attack or a random crime. The scene was too clean, too organized, and my canine partner detected a scent trail leading directly toward the business district." "Detective," Chief Brennan cut her off, "dog scents aren't admissible evidence in court. We need concrete leads that will hold up under scrutiny." Foster opened her case file, determined to present her findings despite the hostile atmosphere. "I've spent the night reviewing Martinez's recent cases, and there's a clear pattern. 3 of his clients received anonymous messages discouraging them from testifying. 2 others reported being followed by unmarked vehicles, and in each case the opposition was connected to Meridian Construction or their subsidiaries." The room fell silent for a moment, but Foster could see the uncomfortable exchanges of glances between the officials. Finally, Councilman Chen spoke, his voice carefully measured. "Detective Foster, I appreciate your thoroughness, but I think you're connecting dots that may not actually be related. Meridian Construction is one of the largest employers in this city. They've contributed millions to local development projects and charitable causes. Are we really going to drag their reputation through the mud based on coincidences and dog scents?" Mayor Hendricks nodded approvingly. "Councilman Chen raises an excellent point. We cannot allow this investigation to become a witch hunt against the very businesses that drive our local economy." Foster looked down at Titan, who seemed to sense his partner's frustration. The German shepherd's dark eyes met hers, and she could almost read the confusion in his expression. His nose had led them to evidence that could be crucial to solving the case, but political considerations were overriding investigative protocols. "Chief Brennan," Foster said, making one final attempt, "I'm requesting permission to follow up on the scent trail that Titan detected. It's possible that—" "Detective," Chief Brennan's voice carried a note of finality, "I need you to understand something. This department is under intense scrutiny right now. Martinez spent the last 2 years filing complaints, but as a problem to be managed." City Attorney Morrison leaned back in her chair, her expression cold and calculating. "Detective Foster, I want to be very direct with you. This city has invested heavily in our partnership with Meridian Construction. They're the primary contractor for the new convention center, the waterfront development project, and the affordable housing initiative. Any investigation that threatens those relationships without concrete evidence will be viewed very seriously by this administration." Foster felt a chill run down her spine. The message was unmistakable. Pursue the wrong leads, and her career would be over. "I understand the political considerations," Foster said carefully, "but my job is to follow the evidence, not to protect business relationships." "Your job," Chief Brennan replied firmly, "is to solve this case in a way that serves the best interests of this community. And right now, the best interests of this community require us to focus on realistic suspects, not conspiracy theories." As the meeting continued, Foster realized that her investigation was being deliberately constrained. The button she had found, the scent trail that Titan had detected, the patterns in Martinez's cases, all of it was being dismissed in favor of a more politically convenient narrative. The fix, she understood with growing horror, was already in. Marcus Thompson had been in the wrong place at the wrong time his entire life, but never more so than on the night David Martinez was found dead outside his law office. A 43-year-old maintenance worker with a history of minor run-ins with authority figures, Thompson had been finishing his shift at the Meridian Plaza complex just hours before the body was discovered. Detective Foster found herself reluctantly pursuing Thompson as a suspect, following orders from Chief Brennan, despite her growing certainty that they were heading down the wrong path. As she sat across from Thompson in the cramped interrogation room, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was participating in a carefully orchestrated miscarriage of justice. Thompson was a thin, nervous man with calloused hands and tired eyes that spoke of years of hard labor and disappointment. His work uniform bore the logo of Plaza Maintenance Services, and his identification badge showed that he had legitimate access to the building where Martinez had his office. "Mr. Thompson," Foster began, her voice professionally neutral despite her internal reservations, "we need to go over your whereabouts." Problems with Thompson's alibi. Public transportation schedules, particularly the late-night buses that served the working-class neighborhoods where Thompson lived, were notoriously unreliable. Proving his exact whereabouts would be nearly impossible. "Mr. Thompson, did you know David Martinez?" Thompson's expression grew wary. "I knew who he was. Saw him in the building sometimes, working late in his office. Seemed like a decent guy, always said hello when he saw me." "Did you ever have any interactions with him? Any conflicts or disagreements?" "No, nothing like that." Thompson paused, then added reluctantly, "Though I did hear him on the phone sometimes when I was cleaning the hallways. He could get pretty heated about his cases, talking about corruption and people not doing their jobs right." Foster felt a stab of frustration. Thompson's observations actually supported her theory that Martinez had been targeted because of his work exposing corruption, but she knew that the investigators were looking for evidence that would support a different narrative entirely. The interrogation continued for 3 hours, during which Thompson's story remained consistent but increasingly desperate. He had no witnesses to his whereabouts after leaving work, no alibi that could be independently verified, and a history of minor altercations with authority figures, including arrest for disorderly conduct 2 years earlier, when he had argued with a police officer during a traffic stop. When Detective Rodriguez, Foster's temporary partner for this case, entered the room with a file folder, Foster knew that the investigation was about to take a decisive turn in the wrong direction. "Thompson," Rodriguez said, dropping the folder on the table with a theatrical thud, "we've been looking into your background. Seems you've had some problems with anger management." Thompson's eyes widened. "That was years ago. I got help, went to counseling. I haven't been in any trouble since. Except for the incident with Officer Bradley 2 years ago," Rodriguez continued. "According to his report, you became belligerent and confrontational during a routine traffic stop." Foster had read Officer Bradley's report, and she knew it was largely fabricated. Bradley had a reputation for escalating minor incidents into major confrontations, particularly with working-class individuals who couldn't afford to fight back. But Thompson's word against a police officer's would carry little weight in court. Over the following days, the case against investigation, as Rodriguez and other detectives took the lead. When she attempted to present her findings about the button and Titan's scent trail, her colleagues dismissed them as irrelevant distractions. "Foster," Rodriguez said during one team meeting, "we've got a suspect with means, motive, and opportunity. Thompson had access to the building, he's got a history of problems with authority, and he can't account for his whereabouts. What more do you need?" "I need evidence that actually connects him to the crime," Foster replied. "The button we found doesn't match anything in Thompson's wardrobe. Titan's scent trail led away from Thompson's usual route home, and the forensic analysis..." "The forensic analysis is ongoing," interrupted Lieutenant Morrison, Rodriguez's supervisor. But we can't wait for every piece of evidence to be processed before making an arrest. The media is breathing down our necks, and the mayor's office is demanding results. Foster realized that the forensic analysis of the button, the crucial piece of evidence that could exonerate Thompson and point toward the real killer, was being deliberately delayed or ignored. The DNA testing that could have provided definitive answers was pushed to the back of the queue, behind less critical evidence from other cases. Thompson's court-appointed attorney was a young public defender named James Mitchell, fresh out of law school and overwhelmed by a caseload of indigent clients. Mitchell had neither the experience nor the resources to mount an effective defense against the circumstantial evidence that the prosecution had assembled. During the brief conversations Foster had with Mitchell, she tried to hint at the problems with the case without directly undermining the investigation. "Mr. Mitchell," she said carefully, "you might want to look closely at the timeline the prosecution is presenting. There are some inconsistencies that a thorough defense should explore." But Mitchell was too inexperienced to read between the lines and too overwhelmed to conduct the kind of independent investigation that might have uncovered the truth. He entered a plea of not guilty and prepared for a trial that he was woefully unprepared to win. The conviction, when it came, was swift and devastating. Thompson was found guilty of second-degree murder, based largely on circumstantial evidence and the testimony of witnesses who placed him in the general vicinity of the crime. The jury, influenced by Thompson's inability to provide a solid alibi and his history of minor confrontation, while Marcus Thompson began what would become 5 years of wrongful imprisonment. The case was closed, the media moved on to other stories, and the city officials who had pressured for quick resolution declared victory. But for Foster, Thompson's conviction marked the beginning of 5 years of doubt, guilt, and growing certainty that justice had not been served. The conviction of Marcus Thompson brought a palpable sense of relief to the corridors of City Hall and the upper floors of the police department. Mayor Hendricks held a press conference praising the swift resolution of the Martinez case, while Chief Brennan publicly commended his detectives for their thorough and professional investigation. The narrative was clean, satisfying, and politically convenient. A troubled maintenance worker with anger issues had committed a crime of opportunity, and the justice system had responded appropriately. But for Detective Sarah Foster, the victory felt hollow and deeply troubling. As she sat in her office 3 days after Thompson's sentencing, reviewing the case files one final time before they were officially archived, every instinct she had developed over 15 years of police work screamed that they had convicted the wrong man. The evidence that had convinced the jury, Thompson's presence in the building, his lack of an alibi, his history of minor confrontations, seemed increasingly flimsy when examined in the harsh light of objective analysis. The evidence that had been ignored or dismissed, the expensive button, Titan's scent trail, the sophisticated nature of the crime, painted a completely different picture of what had happened that night. Foster picked up the evidence bag containing the button, turning it over in her hands. The forensic analysis had finally been completed, weeks after Thompson's conviction, and the results were exactly what she had feared. The DNA on the button belonged to someone else entirely, someone whose genetic profile wasn't in the criminal database, suggesting they had never been arrested or processed through the system. Too little too late, Foster muttered to herself, knowing that appeals based on new evidence were difficult and time-consuming, especially when they challenged convictions that had been politically beneficial. Titan lay at her feet, his intelligent eyes focused on his partner with what seemed like understanding. The German Shepherd had been restless since Thompson's arrest, as if he sensed that his crucial evidence had been ignored. Foster reached down to scratch behind his ears, offering what comfort she could. Her eyes still held the same intense intelligence that Foster remembered from their first meeting. The child was dressed formally, as if she had just come from court, and she carried a small notebook clutched tightly in her hands. "Detective Foster," Emma said, her voice clear and surprisingly mature. "May we speak with you about my father's case?" Foster glanced at Maria, who nodded permission, then gestured for them to enter her office. "Of course, Emma. Please, both of you, have a seat." Emma perched on the edge of the chair across from Foster's desk, her posture alert and focused. "Detective Foster, I attended Mr. Thompson's trial, and I noticed several inconsistencies in the prosecution's timeline." Foster felt her eyebrows rise. It was unusual for a 9-year-old to attend criminal proceedings, much less to analyze them with apparent sophistication. "What kind of inconsistencies, Emma?" Emma opened her notebook, revealing pages of careful handwriting and detailed diagrams. The prosecution claimed that Mr. Thompson committed the crime between 10:45 and 11 p.m., based on the security guard's discovery of the body at 11:15. But according to the building's keycard logs, Mr. Thompson used his access card to exit the building at 10:31 p.m. The bus schedule shows that the Route 47 bus, which he said he took home, arrived at his stop at 10:45 p.m. and departed at 10:47 p.m. Foster leaned forward, intrigued despite herself. "Emma, how did you get access to the keycard logs and bus schedules?" "I requested them through the Freedom of Information Act," Emma replied matter-of-factly. "It took several months, but they're public records." Maria Martinez spoke for the first time since entering the office. "Detective Foster, Emma has been very focused on her father's case since the trial ended. She's been asking questions that I don't know how to answer." Emma continued, oblivious to her mother's concern. "Detective Foster, if Mr. Thompson left the building at 10:31 and caught the 10:47 bus, he couldn't have committed a crime that happened after 10:45. The timeline doesn't work." Foster felt a familiar chill run down her spine, the same sensation she had experienced when Titan first led her to the button near the storm drain. Emma's analysis was not only correct, but more thorough than anything the defense attorney had presented at trial. "Emma," Foster said, "depend. I read the evidence inventory, and it was logged but never properly analyzed until after the trial was over." The question hit Foster like a physical blow. Emma had identified the single most troubling aspect of the investigation, the deliberate delay in processing crucial evidence that could have exonerated Thompson. "How did you know about the button, Emma?" "I've been reading all the public records related to my father's case. The initial crime scene report mentioned that Titan found an expensive button near a storm drain, but it wasn't mentioned again in any of the subsequent reports or during the trial." Foster realized that she was looking at something extraordinary. Emma Martinez, at 9 years old, had conducted a more thorough analysis of her father's case than most professional investigators would have managed. Her insights were not the random observations of a grieving child, but the systematic analysis of a remarkably gifted mind. "Emma," Foster said slowly, "what do you think really happened to your father?" Emma's expression grew serious beyond her years. "I think someone wanted to stop him from testifying about Meridian construction, and I think Mr. Thompson was chosen as a convenient suspect because he couldn't prove where he was, and because he didn't have enough money for a good lawyer." The brutal honesty of Emma's assessment left Foster speechless. The child had identified not only the flaws in the investigation, but the systemic inequalities that had made Thompson's conviction possible. Maria Martinez looked uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. "Emma, sweetheart, I think we've taken enough of Detective Foster's time." But Emma wasn't finished. "Detective Foster, my father told me to pay attention to details that others might miss, and to ask questions that others might not think to ask. I've been doing that for a whole year now, and I know that Mr. Thompson didn't hurt my father." Foster looked into Emma's eyes and saw a determination that reminded her powerfully of David Martinez. The child had inherited not only her father's intelligence, but his commitment to justice, even when that commitment was inconvenient or dangerous. "Emma," Foster said, "what are you planning to do with these observations?" "I'm going to keep investigating," Emma replied with quiet confidence. "The adults made mistakes, and Mr. Thompson is in prison because of those mistakes. Someone needs to find the truth." As Emma found herself hoping that the brilliant child would succeed where the adult world had failed. The real investigation, Foster understood, was just beginning. By the time Emma Martinez turned 10, her grief had crystallized into something far more dangerous to those who had covered up her father's murder. an unshakable determination to uncover the truth, backed by an intellect that was growing more formidable with each passing day. What had begun as a child's desperate attempt to understand her father's death had evolved into a systematic pursuit of justice that would have impressed veteran investigators. The transformation hadn't happened overnight. In the months following Marcus Thompson's conviction, Emma had struggled with the disconnect between what the adults around her claimed was justice and what her analytical mind recognized as a fundamental failure of the system. The more she learned about investigative procedures and legal processes, the more obvious it became that Thompson's conviction had been built on a foundation of convenience rather than evidence. Emma's academic acceleration had begun as a coping mechanism, a way to lose herself in the comforting logic of mathematics and science when the emotional weight of her father's absence became overwhelming. But she soon realized that her advanced placement in high school courses while still in elementary school age provided her with an unexpected advantage: direct access to resources that most children could never obtain. Her mathematics teacher, Dr. Patricia Yamamoto, had been the first to recognize that Emma's capabilities extended far beyond typical gifted student programs. When Emma completed a semester's worth of statistical analysis coursework in 3 weeks, Dr. Yamamoto arranged for her to audit advanced courses at the local university. "Emma," Dr. Yamamoto had said during one of their after-school sessions, "I've never encountered a student with your combination of analytical ability and pattern recognition skills. Have you considered what you'd like to focus on as you advance academically?" Emma's response had been immediate and unwavering. "I want to study criminology, forensic science, and investigative methodology." The university's library became Emma's second home. While other 10-year-olds spent their afternoons playing video games or watching television, Emma immersed herself in criminology textbooks, forensic journals, and case studies of famous investigations. Her university student ID, obtained through her audit status, gave her access to academic databases that contained thousands of research papers on criminal techniques, forensic evidence processing, behavioral profiling, and legal procedures. Each file contained not only academic information, but also Emma's own observations about how these techniques could be applied to her father's case. Her bedroom gradually transformed into something resembling a detective's office. Color-coded folders lined her shelves, each labeled with precise descriptions of their contents. Timelines covered her walls, tracking not only the events of her father's murder, but also the progression of his legal cases, the political pressures surrounding the investigation, and the timeline of Thompson's arrest and conviction. Maria Martinez watched her daughter's transformation with a mixture of pride and deep concern. She was immensely proud of Emma's academic achievements. Her daughter was already performing at a college level in multiple subjects and had earned recognition from university professors who were amazed by her analytical capabilities. But she was also worried about the intensity of Emma's focus on her father's case and the emotional toll it was taking on a child who should have been concerned with typical childhood activities. "Mija," Maria said one evening as she found Emma surrounded by legal documents and crime scene photographs, "I'm worried that you're not giving yourself time to just be a kid. Maybe you should join some after-school activities, make friends with children your own age." Emma looked up from her work, her expression serious beyond her years. "Mama, Mr. Thompson is sitting in prison for something he didn't do. Every day that passes is another day the real killer remains free. I can't just ignore that and pretend to care about typical childhood things." Maria sank into the chair beside Emma's desk, studying her daughter's work. The level of organization and analytical sophistication was remarkable. Emma had created investigative materials that would have impressed seasoned detectives. But Maria could also see the emotional weight her daughter was carrying, the way her young shoulders bore the burden of seeking justice that the adult world had failed to provide. "Emma, what if you're wrong? What if the police and the courts got it right, and Mr. Thompson really did hurt your father?" Emma's response was immediate and backed by evidence. "Mama, look at this." She pulled out a thick folder labeled Witness Statement Analysis. I've identified 17 inconsistencies in the witness statements that were finishing his cleaning rounds on the third floor. The precision of Emma's analysis was breathtaking. She had identified patterns in the witness statements that suggested coordination rather than independent observation. Multiple witnesses describing Thompson's behavior in remarkably similar language, using phrases that appeared to have been suggested rather than spontaneously recalled. "And look at this, Mama," Emma said, pulling out another file. "I've analyzed the linguistic patterns in the witness statements, and 3 of them contain identical grammatical structures and vocabulary choices. The probability of that happening naturally is less than 2%. Maria stared at her daughter's work in amazement. Emma had not only identified inconsistencies in individual witness statements, but had discovered evidence suggesting that some of the testimony against Thompson had been deliberately coordinated. "Emma," Maria said slowly, "how did you learn to do this kind of analysis?" "I've been studying forensic linguistics and behavioral analysis through the university library," Emma replied. "Dr. Chen's course on statistical analysis of testimonial evidence was particularly helpful." The breakthrough moment came on a rainy Thursday afternoon in November. Emma had been working on a comprehensive analysis of all witness statements when she noticed something that made her pulse quicken with excitement. She had been mapping the witnesses' claimed positions and sight lines when she realized that 2 of them claimed to have observed Thompson from locations that would have made such observation physically impossible. "Mama," Emma called excitedly from her room, "come look at this." Maria hurried in to find Emma standing before a detailed map of the crime scene area, colored pins marking various locations and sight lines drawn in different colored markers. "Mrs. Patterson claimed she saw Thompson from the parking spot here," Emma explained, pointing to a red pin, "but this dumpster would have blocked her view of the building entrance. Mr. Rodriguez said he observed Thompson from this location, but the angle is wrong. He would have been looking at the side of the building, not the front entrance where Thompson allegedly appeared suspicious." Emma's first major breakthrough had revealed not just inconsistencies in the witness testimony, but evidence of what appeared to be perjury. The witnesses had claimed to observe things that would have been physically impossible from their alleged positions. "Emma," Maria said, her voice filled with a mixture of pride and concern, "what are you going to do with this information?" Years old and already thinking like a seasoned detective, had taken her first major step toward exposing the conspiracy that had claimed her father's life and destroyed an innocent man's freedom. Her grief had been channeled into purpose, and that purpose was becoming a force that would ultimately prove impossible to ignore. Emma's 11th birthday came and went with little fanfare, marked only by her mother's quiet celebration and Emma's own private milestone. She had gained access to the university's advanced criminology database, a resource that professional investigators often relied upon for complex cases. What had begun as academic curiosity had evolved into sophisticated detective work that would have impressed seasoned law enforcement professionals. The computer in Emma's room had become her most valuable investigative tool. Through her university access, she could search legal databases, forensic journals, and criminal case archives that contained decades of investigative expertise. Emma approached this treasure trove of information with the same methodical precision she applied to everything else, creating elaborate filing systems and cross-reference guides that allowed her to quickly locate relevant information. Her first major discovery came while researching similar cases in the National Criminal Database. Emma had developed a search algorithm that looked for murders involving civil rights attorneys, cases where the convicted suspects had weak alibis, and investigations that had been concluded unusually quickly due to political pressure. "This is incredible," Emma whispered to herself as case after case appeared on her screen, each bearing uncomfortable similarities to her father's murder. In Detroit, civil rights attorney Marcus Williams had been found dead outside his office 3 years earlier. The convicted killer was a janitor with a criminal record who couldn't prove his whereabouts. The investigation had lasted only 2 weeks before an arrest was made. In Phoenix, attorney Sarah Chen, who specialized in corporate whistleblower cases, had been killed in what was ruled a random mugging. The convicted perpetrator was a homeless man with mental health issues who had no memory of the alleged crime due to his condition. In Atlanta, environmental lawyer Robert Jackson, who had been investigating illegal dumping by major corporations, had been found dead in his car. A maintenance worker from his office building had been convicted based largely on circumstantial evidence. Convicted individuals. Her analysis revealed a disturbing pattern that suggested her father's case was not an isolated incident, but part of a larger pattern of systematic elimination of attorneys who threatened powerful corporate interests. The forensic science materials Emma studied online proved equally revealing. Through MIT's open courseware program, she had access to advanced courses in forensic analysis, crime scene reconstruction, and behavioral profiling. Emma absorbed this information with the intensity of someone whose life depended on understanding every detail. Her study of crime scene analysis revealed just how sloppy the investigation of her father's murder had been. Professional forensic protocols called for systematic documentation of every piece of evidence, careful analysis of blood spatter patterns, detailed reconstruction of the sequence of events, and thorough canvassing for physical evidence. None of these protocols had been followed in her father's case. Emma's analysis of the crime scene photographs, obtained through her Freedom of Information Act requests, revealed crucial evidence that had been overlooked or ignored. The positioning of her father's body suggested he had been moved after death. The absence of defensive wounds indicated he had been caught completely off guard, likely by someone he trusted. The clean nature of the crime scene suggested the perpetrator had forensic knowledge and had taken steps to avoid leaving evidence. This wasn't a crime of passion by a maintenance worker, Emma concluded, documenting her findings in a detailed report that included crime scene analysis, behavioral profiling, and statistical analysis of similar cases. This was a professional elimination carried out by someone with significant resources and expertise. Emma's psychological profiling work, based on FBI behavioral analysis techniques she had studied through online courses, painted a clear picture of the type of person who could have committed her father's murder. The killer would be highly organized, likely educated, with access to resources and inside knowledge of investigative procedures. They would be someone who could move freely in professional environments without arousing suspicion. This profile was the complete opposite of Marcus Thompson. The most sophisticated aspect of Emma's digital detective work involved her analysis of corporate connections and financial trails. Using business databases and public records, Emma began mapping the complex web of relationships between Meridian Construction, city officials, and the various entities that had been threatened for their more questionable activities. Emma created detailed organizational charts showing the connections between Meridian's executives, city officials, and the various businesses that had been subjects of her father's investigations. The complexity of the network explained why her father's upcoming testimony had been so threatening. It would have exposed not just individual corruption, but an entire system of coordinated criminal activity. Her financial analysis revealed that several of her father's clients had received anonymous payments shortly before withdrawing their complaints against Meridian Construction. The amounts were significant enough to be life-changing for working-class individuals, but small enough to be easily hidden within Meridian's massive operating budget. They were buying silence, Emma realized, documenting the payment patterns and their correlation with withdrawn legal complaints. Emma's most chilling discovery came when she expanded her analysis to include the period after her father's death. 3 more attorneys who had been working on cases involving Meridian Construction had either withdrawn their cases or experienced accidents that prevented them from continuing their legal work. The pattern was unmistakable. Her father's murder hadn't been an isolated incident, but part of a systematic campaign to eliminate legal threats to Meridian Construction's criminal enterprise. Emma's psychological analysis of the perpetrator began to focus on someone with the sophistication to orchestrate multiple eliminations while maintaining plausible deniability. This person would have connections to both the corporate world and law enforcement, the resources to arrange witness coordination, and the influence to ensure that investigations were conducted in ways that protected the real criminals. As Emma compiled her findings into a comprehensive digital case file, she realized that she had uncovered evidence of a conspiracy that reached far beyond her father's murder. She had documented a pattern of criminal activity that involved corporate executives, city officials, and possibly corrupt law enforcement personnel. The 11-year-old girl who had started with questions about her father's death had evolved into a digital detective whose investigative capabilities rivaled those of professional investigators. Her methodical approach, combined with her access to resources and her analytical abilities, had allowed her to uncover truths that the adult world had either missed or deliberately ignored. But Emma also realized that her discoveries had put her in potential danger. The same people who had eliminated her father and to her father's personal case files through a legal provision that granted her access to his estate materials upon reaching the age of majority for certain legal purposes. Her mother had initially resisted Emma's request to examine these files, fearing they would contain disturbing details about David Martinez's final cases. But Emma's persistence, combined with her demonstrated analytical capabilities, finally convinced Maria to allow her daughter access to the materials that might provide the missing pieces of the puzzle. Emma approached her father's files with the same methodical precision she had applied to all her previous investigative work. She created a systematic inventory of every document, photograph, and piece of correspondence, cataloging them by date, case relevance, and potential evidentiary value. What she discovered in those files exceeded even her most optimistic expectations for finding new evidence. Her father had been meticulous in his documentation, keeping detailed records not only of his legal cases, but also of the connections he had begun to identify between seemingly unrelated incidents of corporate misconduct. Emma found herself looking at the work of an attorney who had been conducting his own investigation into a web of corruption that extended far beyond any single case. The most significant discovery was a series of files labeled Pattern Recognition, Corporate Intimidation. David Martinez had been tracking incidents involving threats, harassment, and suspicious accidents involving individuals who had come forward with information about Meridian Construction's illegal activities. Emma's analytical mind immediately recognized that her father had been doing work similar to her own, identifying patterns that individual cases might not reveal. Emma spread the documents across her bedroom floor, creating a timeline that stretched along one entire wall. What emerged was a chilling picture of systematic intimidation that had been escalating in the months before her father's death. Witnesses had been receiving anonymous phone calls, advising them to reconsider their testimony. Employees who had reported safety violations had been experiencing suspicious vehicle malfunctions. Contractors who had refused to participate in fraudulent billing schemes had found their businesses suddenly failing inspection processes they had previously passed without difficulty. He knew, Emma whispered to herself as the full scope of her father's investigation became clear. He knew they were systematically eliminating opposition. Enterprise. The name that appeared repeatedly in her father's notes was Vincent Carlisle. Emma had encountered Carlisle's name in her previous research, but she had not fully understood his central role in the conspiracy. According to her father's investigation, Carlisle was a high-powered lobbyist who served as the primary interface between Meridian Construction and city officials. He was the person who ensured that contracts were awarded to the right companies, that inspections were conducted by cooperative officials, and that legal challenges were minimized through whatever means necessary. Emma's research into Carlisle's background revealed a sophisticated operative with connections throughout the city's power structure. He had worked for the mayor's office, served on various city planning committees, and maintained close relationships with key figures in law enforcement leadership. His position gave him access to information about ongoing investigations, and the influence to ensure that those investigations proceeded in directions that served his client's interests. Emma's father had been preparing to expose Carlyle's role in coordinating the network of corruption when he was killed. Emma created a detailed profile of Carlyle based on her father's notes and her own research. Unlike Marcus Thompson, Carlyle had the means, motive, and opportunity to commit the murder. He had access to information about her father's investigation timeline, the resources to orchestrate a sophisticated elimination, and the connections to ensure that the subsequent investigation would focus on convenient suspects rather than the real perpetrator. Emma's analysis of Carlyle's background revealed several crucial details that connected him to the crime scene evidence that had been ignored during the original investigation. Carlyle was known for wearing custom-tailored suits from exclusive designers, exactly the type of garment that would have the expensive button that Titan had found near the storm drain. Emma's psychological profile of Carlyle revealed someone who would be capable of both the planning and execution of her father's murder. He had demonstrated a pattern of escalating responses to threats against his criminal enterprise, moving from intimidation to more serious forms of elimination when lesser measures proved ineffective. The realization that she had identified her father's real killer filled Emma with both excitement and terror. She had uncovered evidence that could exonerate Marcus Thompson and expose a conspiracy that reached the highest levels of city government. Strategies could be developed. She covered her walls with detailed charts showing the relationships between various players in the corruption network, timelines of criminal activities, and analysis of evidence that had been ignored or suppressed during the original investigation. The centerpiece of her war room was a detailed crime board that would have impressed seasoned detectives. Emma had created a comprehensive visual representation of her father's murder, including crime scene analysis, suspect profiles, motive analysis, and evidence evaluation. The board clearly demonstrated the weaknesses in the case against Marcus Thompson and the compelling evidence pointing toward Vincent Carlyle as the real perpetrator. Emma's methodical approach had transformed her from a grieving child into a formidable investigator whose work rivaled that of professional detectives. Her analysis was more thorough than the original investigation, her evidence more compelling than what had been presented at Thompson's trial, and her conclusions more logically sound than the politically motivated narrative that had resulted in Thompson's conviction. But Emma also understood that having the evidence was only the first step. She needed to find someone in the adult world who would take her seriously, someone with the authority and integrity to act on the information she had uncovered. The same political pressures that had resulted in Thompson's wrongful conviction were still in place, and the same powerful interests that had orchestrated her father's murder were still operating. Emma Martinez, at 12 years old, had solved her father's murder and identified a conspiracy that reached the highest levels of power in her city. Now she faced the most challenging part of her quest for justice, convincing the adult world to listen to the truth that a child had uncovered when they had failed to find it themselves. The cold trail had become a blazing path toward justice, but Emma understood that following that path would require allies, courage, and a willingness to face dangers that had already claimed her father's life. The financial records Emma discovered in her father's personal files painted a picture of corruption so vast and systematic that it initially overwhelmed even her analytical capabilities. David Martinez had been conducting what amounted to a forensic accounting investigation, tracing money flows through a labyrinthine network of shell companies, municipal contracts, and private accounts that revealed the true scope of the criminal enterprise he had been preparing to expose. Emma spread the financial documents across her bedroom floor. Financial conspiracy was Meridian Construction's manipulation of city contracts through a sophisticated system of overbilling, phantom work orders, and kickbacks to city officials. Emma's analysis revealed that over the past 5 years, Meridian had received contracts worth over $200 million from the city, but the actual work performed was worth perhaps half that amount. They weren't just stealing, Emma realized as she traced the money flows. They were running a systematic operation to drain the city's resources while providing substandard services that put people's lives at risk. Emma's investigation into Meridian's corporate structure revealed a complex network of subsidiary companies and partnerships that allowed them to hide their illegal activities behind layers of legitimate business operations. Meridian Construction was the visible face of the operation, but the real power lay with a holding company called Riverside Development Partners, which controlled dozens of smaller companies that received subcontracts from Meridian's city projects. Vincent Carlisle's name appeared throughout the financial records, not as an employee of Meridian, but as a consultant who received substantial payments from various companies within the network. Emma's analysis revealed that Carlisle's consulting fees were actually payments for his services in ensuring that city contracts were awarded to the right companies and that potentially problematic investigations were derailed before they could threaten the operation. Emma discovered that Carlisle's influence extended throughout the city government. Her father's notes identified corrupt relationships with city council members Robert Chen and Patricia Hendricks, building inspector James Morrison, and police chief Brennan. Each of these officials had received substantial donations to their campaign funds or had been provided with lucrative consulting opportunities with companies controlled by the Riverside Development Partners network. The scope of the corruption was breathtaking. Emma found evidence that building inspections were routinely falsified to allow substandard construction that maximized Meridian's profits while endangering public safety. Environmental impact studies were manipulated to minimize regulatory oversight of projects that caused significant ecological damage. Zoning decisions were influenced by bribes disguised as legitimate political contributions. Emma's analysis of her father's financial investigation revealed that he had been with investigations. Emma's analysis showed a clear pattern. Individuals who received these payments suddenly became uncooperative with authorities, while those who refused the payments often experienced escalating forms of harassment and intimidation. Emma found records of payments to Martha Rodriguez, a city building inspector who had initially reported safety violations at Meridian construction sites, but had later reversed her findings. Thomas Walsh, a former Meridian employee who had reported fraudulent billing practices, had received a substantial payment shortly before leaving the city and refusing to testify in ongoing investigations. The most disturbing discovery was evidence that the intimidation campaign had escalated to include more serious forms of elimination. Emma found records showing that 3 individuals who had refused to accept payment for their silence had experienced accidents that prevented them from testifying. Sarah Chen, an environmental scientist who had documented illegal dumping at Meridian sites, had died in a car accident 2 weeks before she was scheduled to testify. Michael Torres, a whistleblowing accountant, had suffered a serious fall at his apartment building that left him with memory problems that made him an unreliable witness. Emma's analytical mind immediately recognized that these incidents were not coincidental. The timing, the targeting of key witnesses, and the nature of the accidents all pointed to a systematic elimination campaign designed to protect the criminal enterprise. Emma's investigation revealed that her father had been aware of the escalating elimination campaign and had been taking precautions to protect himself and his family. He had arranged for copies of his evidence to be stored in multiple locations and had been preparing to present his findings to federal authorities who would be beyond the reach of local corruption. But Emma's analysis also revealed why her father's elimination had become necessary from the conspirators' perspective. His upcoming testimony would have exposed not only the financial crimes, but also the systematic intimidation and elimination campaign. He had evidence that could have resulted in federal RICO charges against the entire network, potentially leading to decades of prison sentences for everyone involved. Emma created a comprehensive financial analysis that traced over $50 million in fraudulent payments, documented bribes to at least 7 city officials, and identified evidence of money laundering. Understood that the same people who had killed her father and orchestrated the elimination of other witnesses would not hesitate to target a 12-year-old girl who threatened their criminal enterprise. Emma's analysis had revealed that her father's murder was not an isolated incident, but part of a systematic campaign of elimination that had been escalating for years. The conspiracy involved dozens of people, millions of dollars, and a level of coordination that required resources and influence far beyond anything Marcus Thompson could have possessed. As Emma documented her findings in a comprehensive report that included financial analysis, organizational charts, and evidence of systematic criminal activity, she realized that she had uncovered one of the largest municipal corruption cases in the city's history. Her work had the potential to bring down an entire network of criminals who had been operating with impunity for years. But translating her discoveries into justice would require finding someone in the adult world with the courage and integrity to act on the evidence she had uncovered. Emma's discovery of her father's personal correspondence files revealed a chilling escalation of intimidation that had preceded his death by several months. Hidden within boxes of legal documents, Emma found a collection of threatening letters, voicemails, and email messages that painted a disturbing picture of systematic harassment designed to discourage David Martinez from pursuing his investigation into the Meridian construction conspiracy. The threats had begun as subtle suggestions that David should reconsider his involvement in cases that could damage important business relationships and harm the city's economic development. The early messages were unsigned and delivered through intermediaries, but Emma's analytical mind immediately recognized patterns in language, timing, and delivery methods that suggested coordination from a single source. Emma applied the linguistic analysis techniques she had learned through her university coursework to examine the threatening messages. Unlike the crude, poorly written threats that might be expected from someone like Marcus Thompson, these messages demonstrated sophisticated vocabulary, complex sentence structures, and intimate knowledge of legal procedures and David's specific cases. The language patterns are completely inconsistent with Thompson's education level and communication style, Emma noted in her analysis. These threats were written by someone with advanced education, possibly legal training, and detailed knowledge of father's case strategy. Emma's examination of the voicemail threats revealed voicemail, left just 2 weeks before David's death, contains specific details about his family's daily routines. Mr. Martinez, your daughter Emma walks to school every morning at 7:45. She's a bright child. It would be unfortunate if her academic career were to be disrupted by unnecessary complications arising from your current legal pursuits. Emma's analysis of this message revealed several crucial details that pointed away from Thompson and toward someone with significant resources and surveillance capabilities. The speaker knew Emma's name, her school schedule, and the specific timing of her daily activities. This level of detailed surveillance required resources and coordination far beyond anything Thompson could have organized. Emma created a timeline correlating the escalation of threats with David's progress on the Meridian case. The pattern was unmistakable. Each major breakthrough in David's investigation was followed within days by increasingly serious threats. When David obtained internal Meridian documents showing fraudulent billing practices, he received a letter warning that continued pursuit of unfounded allegations could have serious consequences for your family's safety. When David identified the connection between Meridian and the shell companies used for money laundering, he received a phone call stating that accidents can happen to anyone, even experienced attorneys who think they're being careful. Emma's analysis revealed that the threatening messages contained inside information about David's investigation that could only have come from someone with access to privileged information about his case strategy. The threats referenced specific documents that David had obtained through discovery, mentioned witnesses he had interviewed confidentially, and demonstrated knowledge of his planned testimony timeline. Someone on the inside was feeding information to the people making the threats, Emma concluded. This wasn't random intimidation. This was targeted harassment based on detailed intelligence about father's investigation. Emma's investigation into the delivery methods of the threats revealed additional evidence of sophisticated coordination. Some messages were delivered through intermediaries who claimed to be concerned citizens warning David about the consequences of pursuing his cases. Others arrived through anonymous email accounts that Emma's technical analysis revealed had been created using sophisticated methods to hide their true origins. The most disturbing aspect of Emma's threat assessment was her recognition that the intimidation campaign had been that her father had been targeted by professionals who understood both the legal system and psychological manipulation techniques. The threatening campaign had been designed to wear down David's resolve gradually, while avoiding the creation of evidence that could be easily traced back to its origins. Emma's analysis of her father's responses to the threats revealed his growing awareness of the danger he faced. In his later correspondence with colleagues, David had begun to reference his concerns about his family's safety and his preparations for the possibility that something might happen to him. One letter to his law partner, dated just 1 week before his death, contained a chilling recognition of his situation. I understand that the people I'm investigating have demonstrated a willingness to eliminate obstacles to their criminal enterprise. I've taken precautions to ensure that my evidence will survive even if I don't. Emma's examination of the final threatening message, received just 3 days before David's death, revealed what amounted to an ultimatum. Mr. Martinez, your stubbornness has created problems that require resolution. Your testimony scheduled for next week will not occur. Consider this your final opportunity to reconsider your position. The linguistic analysis of this final message revealed sophisticated knowledge of legal proceedings, specific awareness of David's testimony schedule, and language patterns consistent with someone who had legal or professional training. The message also contained geographical references that suggested the sender was familiar with the local area and David's daily routines. Emma's threat assessment revealed that her father's murder had been preceded by months of systematic intimidation designed to force him to abandon his investigation. When the psychological pressure failed to achieve the desired result, the conspirators had escalated to physical elimination. The analysis also revealed that Emma herself had been specifically mentioned in the threatening messages, indicating that the conspirators were aware of her existence and had considered her a potential target even before her father's death. The realization that she had been under surveillance filled Emma with both fear and determination. Fear for her safety, but also determination to ensure that her father's killers would not escape justice. Emma's threat assessment provided compelling evidence that David Martinez had been killed by sophisticated criminals with significant resources, detailed intelligence capabilities, and a willingness to eliminate anyone who threatened their criminal enterprise. The evidence of father's murder, but also proof of ongoing criminal activity that continued to threaten other potential witnesses and investigators. The same people who had systematically intimidated and ultimately killed her father were still operating, still eliminating threats to their criminal enterprise. Emma understood that her own investigation had likely attracted the attention of the same people who had targeted her father. The realization filled her with both fear and resolve. She was walking in her father's footsteps, pursuing the same dangerous truths that had cost him his life. The moment of revelation came at 2:17 a.m. on a sleepless Tuesday night in March, when Emma's exhausted mind finally made the connection that had been eluding her for months. She had been staring at her crime board, analyzing the various threads of evidence she had collected, when suddenly the disparate pieces of information aligned into a clear and devastating picture of guilt that pointed directly at Vincent Carlyle. Emma sat up in her bed, her heart racing with the excitement of discovery. She had been approaching the case as separate investigations: the financial crimes, the intimidation campaign, the murder itself. But suddenly she could see how they all connected through one central figure who had the means, motive, opportunity, and sophisticated knowledge necessary to orchestrate the entire conspiracy. Emma quickly moved to her desk and began documenting the connections she had just recognized. Vincent Carlisle wasn't just a peripheral figure in the Meridian construction conspiracy. He was the central coordinator who had made the entire criminal enterprise possible through his unique position bridging the corporate and political worlds. Emma's analysis revealed that Carlisle had access to privileged information about David Martinez's investigation through his connections with corrupt city officials. As a lobbyist who regularly attended city council meetings and maintained relationships with key political figures, Carlisle would have known about David's planned testimony timeline, his witness list, and the specific evidence he had been gathering. The threatening messages that David had received contained inside information that could only have come from someone with access to confidential details about his case strategy. Emma's analysis showed that the timing of the threats consistently followed David's confidential communications with city officials or court filings that had not yet become public record. Carlisle had access to information from both sides, or coordination. Carlisle had the financial means to organize a professional elimination. His consulting income from the Meridian network exceeded $500,000 annually, providing him with resources that could fund surveillance, witness intimidation, and ultimately murder. Emma's analysis of Carlisle's educational and professional background revealed someone with the sophisticated knowledge necessary to plan and execute David's murder. Carlisle had attended law school before transitioning into lobbying, giving him detailed understanding of legal procedures and evidence-gathering techniques. His corporate consulting work had exposed him to high-level strategic planning and risk management, skills that would be directly applicable to organizing a criminal conspiracy. The expensive button that Detective Foster's dog Titan had found near the crime scene suddenly took on new significance in Emma's analysis. Emma had researched the button's origin and discovered it came from an exclusive tailor who served wealthy professionals and politicians. Marcus Thompson's entire wardrobe could not have afforded a single garment from this establishment, but Carlisle was exactly the type of client who would wear custom-tailored suits with expensive buttons. Emma's examination of photographs from city functions and political events revealed Carlisle wearing suits that appeared to have similar buttons to the one found at the crime scene. While she couldn't make a definitive match from photographs alone, the consistency was compelling evidence that Carlisle, not Thompson, had been present at the murder scene. Emma's psychological profile analysis revealed that Carlisle had the personality characteristics consistent with someone capable of planning and executing murder. His professional success had required him to manipulate people and situations to achieve desired outcomes. His lobbying work involved convincing officials to act against the public interest in exchange for personal benefits, a form of corruption that required comfort with moral flexibility and deception. Emma's review of Carlisle's professional history revealed a pattern of escalating responses to obstacles that threatened his business interests. Early in his career, Carlisle had relied on persuasion and financial incentives to achieve his goals. But Emma's research showed that as his influence grew and the stakes increased, his methods had become more aggressive and potentially dangerous. The timeline of Carlisle's involvement with Meridian construction coincided perfectly with the escalation of intimidation tactics used against witnesses and investigators. Emma's analysis contradicting any potential alibi he might claim. His attendance at a political fundraising event had been documented in local media, but the event had ended at 9:30 p.m., leaving him unaccounted for during the time when the murder occurred. Emma realized that she had assembled compelling evidence linking Vincent Carlisle to all aspects of the conspiracy: the financial crimes, the intimidation campaign, and the murder itself. Unlike Marcus Thompson, who had been convicted based on weak circumstantial evidence and prosecutorial convenience, Carlisle had demonstrated means, motive, opportunity, and behavioral patterns consistent with guilt. Emma's breakthrough filled her with both excitement and terror. She had solved her father's murder and identified evidence that could exonerate Marcus Thompson, while exposing a conspiracy that reached the highest levels of city government. But she also understood that possessing this evidence put her in grave danger from the same people who had killed her father. Emma made the crucial decision that she had gathered sufficient evidence to approach law enforcement, but she also recognized that she needed to be strategic about how she presented her findings. The same political pressures that had resulted in Thompson's wrongful conviction were still in place, and many of the officials who had participated in the cover-up were still in positions of authority. Emma began developing a comprehensive strategy for presenting her evidence in a way that would be credible despite her age, and would be difficult for corrupt officials to suppress or dismiss. She understood that she would need to find law enforcement officers with integrity and courage, people like Detective Foster, who had been troubled by the original investigation, but had been powerless to pursue the truth. Emma's plan involved documenting her evidence so thoroughly and presenting it so professionally that it would be impossible to dismiss as the fantasies of a grieving child. She would need to demonstrate that her analysis was more sophisticated and reliable than the original investigation, and that her conclusions were based on evidence rather than emotion. As Emma prepared to take the most dangerous step of her young life, confronting the adult world with evidence of a conspiracy that had already claimed her father's life, she understood that she was following the same path that had led to David Martinez's murder. But she also understood that remaining silent would mean that her father's killers would never face justice, and that Marcus Thompson would remain imprisoned for a crime he didn't commit. The missing link, ignored or worse, fed back to the very people who had buried the truth about her father's murder. Her only real hope was Detective Sarah Foster. Months of research had convinced Emma that if there was anyone in the department with the integrity to listen and the courage to act, it was her. For 60 days, Emma dissected Foster's career through old newspaper archives, police press releases, and court records. She built a profile the way a seasoned investigator would, checking patterns, cross-referencing cases, looking for red flags. She found none. Foster's record showed meticulous, evidence-driven investigations and commendations for solving cold cases others had given up on. One detail stood out. After Marcus Thompson's conviction, Foster had been quietly pulled from the Martinez case and shuffled into low-profile work. In Emma's mind, that wasn't punishment for incompetence. It was what happened when integrity became inconvenient. Even better, Foster had a reputation for listening to everyone, regardless of age. Court transcripts showed her taking testimony from children and teens, treating them as credible witnesses. If Emma played this right, Foster might be the one adult who wouldn't dismiss her because of her age. So Emma prepared her approach like a tactical mission. Her evidence was bound into a presentation, executive summaries, financial analysis, reconstructed timelines, and comparative case studies. Every page was formatted like it belonged in a prosecutor's office. On top sat a brief biography of her academic work and investigative training, her first line of defense against the skepticism she knew was coming. It took weeks to get the meeting. The desk sergeant had been seconds away from hanging up until Emma's steady, formal tone wore him down. He gave her 15 minutes. On a cold, gray Thursday in November, Emma walked into the station carrying a slim leather briefcase. She'd chosen her most professional outfit and rehearsed her introduction until she could deliver it without a single wasted word. When Foster emerged, her guarded expression said it all. This was an interruption she hadn't wanted. "Ms. Martinez," she said politely, "I understand you believe you have information about your father's case. The case has been officially closed, and Marcus Thompson was convicted on solid evidence." Emma opened her briefcase and slid a thin folder across the desk. "Before we talk about my findings, I'd like you to review my 2 years. I've been investigating my father's murder for 3. The change in Foster's eyes was subtle but unmistakable. "What kind of investigation?" Emma began laying documents on the desk in a careful sequence. Financial analysis of the Meridian construction conspiracy, linguistic breakdown of the threats sent to my father, a full reconstruction of the timeline around his death. comparative studies of similar cases targeting civil rights attorneys. As she spoke, Titan, the German shepherd lying near Foster's desk, lifted his head. He rose, padded over, and studied Emma with steady eyes before sitting beside her chair. Foster noticed. Titan didn't warm to strangers easily. "Show me," Foster said. Emma did. She started with the timeline, pointing out the impossibilities in the prosecution's version of events. She moved to the financial records, mapping payments that connected developers, shell companies, and political donors. Then came the linguistic analysis, proving the threatening letters attributed to Thompson didn't match his education or speech patterns. By the time Emma closed her briefcase, Foster's skepticism was gone. What she'd just seen wasn't the work of a child. It was a professional-grade investigation that had already outpaced the original police work. "Emma," Foster said, her voice filled with amazement, "this is extraordinary work. How did you develop these analytical capabilities?" "My father taught me to pay attention to details that others might miss, and to ask questions that others might not think to ask," Emma replied. "I've been following his advice." As Foster reviewed Emma's evidence, she realized that she was looking at proof of everything she had suspected about the Martinez case, but had been unable to pursue due to political pressure. Emma had uncovered the truth that Foster's investigation had been prevented from finding. The systematic review of the original case files with Detective Foster was both vindicating and heartbreaking for Emma. As they spread the documents across Foster's desk and began comparing the official investigation with Emma's independent research, the flaws in Thompson's conviction became impossible to ignore. Foster unlocked the evidence room and retrieved the original Martinez case files, her expression grim as she realized she was about to confirm what Emma's investigation had suggested, that Marcus Thompson had been convicted based on political convenience rather than evidence. "Emma," Foster said as she opened the first network that made those pressures possible, "I understand that you were prevented from conducting a thorough investigation." Foster looked at Emma with growing respect. The child understood aspects of the case that many adult investigators would have missed. They began with the timeline analysis. Emma presented her detailed reconstruction of the events on the night of David Martinez's murder, while Foster reviewed the official timeline that had been used to convict Thompson. The prosecution claimed that Thompson committed the murder between 10:45 and 11 p.m., Emma explained, pointing to her carefully constructed timeline. But the building's keycard system shows Thompson exited at 10:31 p.m., and the bus schedule documentation shows he caught the 10:47 bus home. Foster examined the keycard records that Emma had obtained through her Freedom of Information Act requests. "Emma, we never thoroughly analyzed the keycard data during the original investigation. The focus was on finding evidence that supported Thompson's guilt, not on testing whether the timeline was actually possible." "Detective Foster," Emma said gently, "I've also identified 17 inconsistencies in the witness statements used to convict Thompson. The witnesses claimed to observe things that would have been physically impossible from their alleged positions." Foster reviewed Emma's analysis of the witness statements, comparing them with crime scene photographs and positioning diagrams. Emma's work revealed that multiple witnesses had testified to observations that contradicted the physical evidence and the established timeline. "This is damning evidence," Foster admitted. "These inconsistencies should have been identified during the original investigation, but we were under pressure to close the case quickly and move on." Emma presented her most devastating evidence, the financial analysis that revealed the scope of the Meridian construction conspiracy and Vincent Carlisle's central role in coordinating the criminal enterprise. "Detective Foster, my father was killed because his upcoming testimony would have exposed this entire network. Thompson had no connection to any of this, no motive for silencing my father, and no knowledge of the testimony schedule." Foster studied Emma's financial documentation with growing amazement. The child had uncovered evidence of crimes that extended far beyond a single murder, revealing a systematic conspiracy that had been operating for years. "Emma," How did you gain access to these financial records? Language patterns that were completely inconsistent with Thompson's educational background and communication abilities. These threats demonstrate detailed knowledge of your father's case strategy and testimony plans, Foster observed. Thompson had no access to this kind of inside information. Detective Foster, Emma said, I believe someone within the police department or city government was providing information to the people who were threatening my father. The threats contained details that were only available to officials involved in the investigation. Foster's face flushed with anger as she realized the implications of Emma's analysis. You're suggesting that there was corruption within the investigation itself. I'm not suggesting it, Detective Foster. I'm proving it. Emma presented her analysis of the button evidence, the crucial piece of physical evidence that Titan had discovered, but that had been deliberately delayed in processing until after Thompson's conviction. The DNA analysis of this button was completed 3 weeks after Thompson's trial ended, Emma explained. The genetic material doesn't match Thompson, but it wasn't processed in time to prevent his wrongful conviction. Foster stared at the evidence bag containing the button, remembering the night when Titan had led her to this crucial piece of evidence. Emma, I tried to follow up on this evidence, but I was told that processing was backlogged and that we had enough evidence to proceed with Thompson's prosecution. Detective Foster, the processing wasn't backlogged. It was deliberately delayed to prevent it from contradicting the case against Thompson. Foster's shoulders sagged as she confronted the full scope of the injustice that had been perpetrated. Emma, everything you're showing me confirms what I suspected but couldn't prove. Thompson's conviction was a travesty of justice. Emma's final presentation involved her identification of Vincent Carlisle as the real perpetrator. She showed Foster the evidence linking Carlisle to the financial crimes, the intimidation campaign, and the murder itself. Carlisle had means, motive, opportunity, and access to inside information, Emma explained. Unlike Thompson, who was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time, Carlisle had compelling reasons to eliminate my father and the resources to orchestrate a sophisticated murder. Foster reviewed Emma's analysis of Carlisle's background, capabilities, and connections. The evidence was compelling and systematic, painting a clear picture of guilt that had been ignored in favor of Thompson. But I also need to know that you're prepared to face the same political pressures that prevented the original investigation from finding the truth. Foster was quiet for a long moment, processing the implications of what Emma was asking. She would be risking her career, her reputation, and possibly her safety to pursue an investigation that powerful people had already demonstrated they would kill to suppress. Emma, Foster said finally, I became a police officer to seek truth and protect the innocent. Marcus Thompson is innocent. Your father's real killer is free, and a massive conspiracy is continuing to operate with impunity. I can't ignore that, regardless of the personal consequences. Emma felt a surge of relief and gratitude. After 3 years of investigating alone, she had finally found an adult with the integrity and courage to help her seek justice. Detective Foster, what do we do next? Foster looked at the overwhelming evidence Emma had assembled, then at Titan, who remained alert and focused on their conversation as if he understood its importance. Emma, we're going to reopen this investigation unofficially. We're going to find additional evidence to support your findings, and we're going to ensure that the truth finally comes to light. The emotional weight of Detective Foster's commitment to seek justice settled over the room like a solemn oath. Emma had spent 3 years carrying the burden of her discoveries alone, wondering if any adult would ever take her seriously or act on the evidence she had uncovered. Now, sitting across from Foster with Titan at her side, Emma felt the profound relief that comes with finding a true ally in an impossible fight. Foster studied Emma's comprehensive evidence files spread across her desk, marveling at the sophistication of analysis that would have impressed veteran investigators. The child had not only identified the flaws in Thompson's conviction, but had also uncovered a conspiracy that reached the highest levels of city government, work that demonstrated investigative capabilities that surpassed those of many professional detectives. Emma, Foster said with genuine amazement. "I need you to understand how extraordinary your work is. You've conducted a more thorough investigation than our entire department managed, and you've identified connections and evidence that we completely missed." Emma's response revealed both her analytical maturity and her emotional vulnerability. "Detective Foster, I was wrong. But I didn't have the courage to pursue my doubts when it would have mattered." Emma's eyes filled with tears, the first time Foster had seen the child display such raw emotion. "Detective Foster, you tried to follow the evidence. I read your reports and I know you identified important clues that were ignored or suppressed. You weren't the problem. The corruption was the problem." The emotional moment was interrupted by Titan, who moved closer to Emma and gently nudged her hand with his nose. The German shepherd seemed to sense the significance of the conversation and offered what comfort he could to the child, who had dedicated her young life to seeking justice. Foster watched her partner's interaction with Emma and recognized something profound. Titan had been present on the night of David Martinez's murder, had led Foster to crucial evidence that had been ignored, and had sensed the injustice of Thompson's conviction. Now, 3 years later, Titan seemed to recognize in Emma a kindred spirit, someone else who refused to accept the convenient lie when the truth was available to those willing to seek it. "Emma," Foster said, "I want to propose that we work together officially. You've proven that your analytical capabilities are exceptional, and I can provide access to resources and information that you can't obtain on your own." Emma straightened in her chair, her emotional moment passing as her analytical mind engaged with the practical implications of Foster's offer. "Detective Foster, what are the risks? If the same people who killed my father discover that we're investigating, they won't hesitate to eliminate us as well." Foster appreciated Emma's realistic assessment of the dangers they would face. The child understood that pursuing justice for her father meant confronting the same people who had already demonstrated their willingness to kill to protect their criminal enterprise. "The risks are significant," Foster admitted. "But Emma, the alternative is allowing your father's killers to remain free while an innocent man serves a life sentence. I can't live with that, and I don't think you can either." Emma nodded, her expression resolving into the determined focus that had sustained her through 3 years of solitary investigation. "Detective Foster, I've been preparing for this moment since I was 9 years old. I understand the risks, but I also understand that justice requires courage." Foster outlined the practical aspects of their partnership. As a detective, she leaned forward, her pulse quickening with anticipation. "Whose DNA was it?" "Vincent Carlyle's." The confirmation of Emma's theoretical analysis with concrete forensic evidence was a moment of profound vindication. Emma had identified Carlyle as the real perpetrator through financial analysis, behavioral profiling, and logical deduction. Now DNA evidence proved that Carlyle had been present at the crime scene. "Detective Foster, do we have enough evidence to arrest Carlyle and exonerate Thompson?" Foster's expression grew cautious. "Emma, we have compelling evidence, but we need to be strategic about how we proceed. The same political forces that resulted in Thompson's wrongful conviction are still in place. If we move too quickly or approach the wrong officials, our evidence could be suppressed or destroyed." Emma understood the complexity of their situation. They possessed proof of Thompson's innocence and Carlyle's guilt, but they were operating in a system where powerful people had already demonstrated their willingness to pervert justice to protect their interests. "What's our next step?" Emma asked. Foster looked at her young partner with respect and determination. "Emma, we're going to build an ironclad case that's so comprehensive and well documented that it will be impossible to suppress or ignore. We're going to gather additional evidence, identify allies who can't be corrupted, and present our findings in a way that forces the system to acknowledge the truth." Emma smiled for the first time since entering Foster's office. After years of investigating alone, carrying the burden of terrible knowledge without anyone to share it with, she finally had a partner who understood both the importance of their mission and the dangers they would face. Titan positioned himself between Emma and Foster, as if recognizing that he now served as the bridge between two investigators united in their pursuit of justice. His presence reminded them both that truth had a way of revealing itself to those with the courage and persistence to seek it. "Detective Foster," Emma said, "my father told me that sometimes doing the right thing is hard, and sometimes it's scary, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't do it." Foster nodded, understanding that she was looking at a child who possessed not only exceptional analytical capabilities, but also the moral courage that had motivated her father's fight for justice. "Emma, we're going to honor your father's memory by ensuring that his real killer faces justice." Official access, a combination that would prove unstoppable in the pursuit of truth. The partnership was also a testament to the power of integrity and courage to transcend conventional boundaries. A 12-year-old girl and a veteran detective, united by their commitment to justice and guided by a German shepherd whose instincts had pointed toward truth from the very beginning, were about to take on a conspiracy that reached the highest levels of power. The return to the Meridian Plaza parking lot 3 years after David Martinez's murder felt like stepping into a storm Emma had been chasing since childhood. On this crisp Saturday morning, she stood with Detective Foster and Titan, the German shepherd whose nose had cracked open more cases than some officers managed in a career. This was where her father had taken his last breath, and perhaps where his killer's trail still lingered. Foster had chosen weekend hours for privacy, away from prying eyes loyal to the corrupt officials who'd framed Marcus Thompson. Emma brought a self-assembled forensic kit, Foster her department gear, and Titan. "Walk me through your theory," Foster said, voice low. Emma unfolded her diagrams, years of research in neat lines and annotated timelines. "My father knew his killer. No defensive wounds. The body position. He was caught off guard mid-conversation. If Vincent Carlisle did it, he used side routes to avoid witnesses. The original team barely looked beyond the body's immediate area. Titan caught a scent along the building's wall, heading toward a discreet service entrance. Emma documented every step. At an ornamental shrub, Titan dug gently. Foster unearthed an expensive gold-plated pen, custom engraved, weathered by 3 years outdoors. "This isn't Thompson's," Emma noted. "It fits Carlisle's taste exactly." Near a storm drain, Titan found fibers, luxury suit material, not work clothes. Then, behind the building, they discovered a partial dress shoe print in dried mud. Emma made a plaster cast, her mind racing. Every clue painted a profile. Wealthy, meticulous, nothing like Thompson. Back at the precinct's evidence storage, they retrieved a neglected piece from the original night. A button Titan had found, mishandled and minimally documented. Emma recognized it immediately. Custom, precious metal, beyond Thompson's reach. DNA testing confirmed Carlisle's profile. Carlisle's unaccounted 2-hour window the night of the murder. Security footage showed a man matching Carlisle's build approaching Meridian Plaza at 10:42 p.m. in an expensive suit, and leaving an hour later, jacket clutched closed as if hiding damage, like a missing button. Emma had enhanced the images, cross-referenced with witness statements, and overlaid credit card logs. Her financial research revealed Carlisle's resources and ties to former military and security operatives, people capable of a clean, efficient killing. "Emma," Foster said, scanning the compiled evidence, "this is stronger than the case they used to convict Thompson. Physical evidence, forensic links, timeline gaps, motive. We have it all." But they knew politics could still smother the truth. Carlisle was shielded by the same network that had railroaded Thompson. Their strategy: first, win Thompson's appeal with this new evidence. Success there would validate their investigation publicly, making it harder to bury the Carlisle case. Emma felt the gravity of their mission. She wasn't just avenging her father. She was freeing an innocent man and challenging a corrupt system. The pen, the fibers, the shoe print, the button, all of it told the same story. Marcus Thompson was not the killer. Vincent Carlisle was. And now, after 3 relentless years, they could prove it. Late March, Emma spotted the first sign that their investigation had attracted dangerous attention. A black sedan parked across from her school, appearing 3 days in a row. Her trained instinct recognized it as deliberate surveillance, not coincidence. The occupants didn't even try to hide, a calculated intimidation to make her feel watched. She told Detective Foster that afternoon. Foster's face darkened. "If they're watching you, it means our investigation has them nervous. Carlisle doesn't waste resources unless he sees a real threat." The following week, the pressure increased. Different vehicles outside Emma's school, home, and the university library where she did research. She documented each sighting with photos and notes, treating the intimidation as evidence. Then came the most unsettling moment, a handwritten note under her bike seat. Brilliant children should focus on their studies rather than adult matters. The polished, manipulative wording matched threats her father had received before his murder. "This confirms it's the same people," Foster said grimly, leaking their case files to Carlisle's associates. The leak explained the enemy's uncanny ability to anticipate their moves. "Emma, they know what evidence we've gathered and what's coming next," Foster warned. They decided to accelerate their timeline, take their findings public before the conspiracy could destroy evidence or silence them. Emma agreed. "If they're threatening us, it means we're close." Thursday afternoon, the Martinez home was broken into while Emma was at school and Maria at work, timed with precision. Emma came home to chaos, her room ransacked, her crime board smashed, her computer and hard drives gone. Family valuables were untouched. Only investigation materials were targeted. "They knew exactly what they were looking for," Emma observed, photographing the damage. Foster's quick sweep confirmed it wasn't amateur work. Skilled lock manipulation, precise targeting, and worse, hidden cameras and listening devices in Emma's room, kitchen, and living room. Someone had been watching them for weeks. Evidence pointed again to an inside leak. Details about their home security and schedules had been pulled from police databases. The break-in was followed by a smear campaign. Anonymous tips to Emma's school claimed she was obsessed and a danger to herself. Social services got calls accusing Maria of neglect. Local media received letters dismissing Emma's work as the fantasies of a grief-stricken child. When her counselor suggested she seek therapy to accept reality, Emma replied steadily, "My investigation is based on evidence and forensic analysis. The people calling it fantasy are the same ones with something to hide." Foster traced the PR effort to the same firm Carlisle's company used for damage control. "They're running psychological warfare against a 12-year-old, she said in disgust. Instead of breaking her, the attacks confirmed to Emma they were on the right track. "They're not just trying to stop us," she told Foster. "They want to destroy our credibility so no one will believe the truth." The danger level was now undeniable. Foster arranged discreet protection. A small circle of uncorrupted officers rotated surveillance around Emma's school and home, disguised as routine patrols. Meetings were moved to unmonitored locations, and they began speaking in coded terms over official channels. Maria, under constant strain, suggested leaving the city. "Your father would want you." "That's why I've documented everything so precisely," Emma replied. "The evidence speaks for itself." Emma made multiple backup copies of all files, storing them in secure, hidden locations and with trusted allies. If anything happened to her or Foster, the findings would still reach journalists and federal investigators. "Having evidence isn't enough if corrupt officials can suppress it," she explained. "We make sure the truth survives us." She accepted that they might not bring down the entire conspiracy immediately, but freeing Marcus Thompson and exposing corruption would be victory enough to keep fighting. "Sometimes justice happens gradually," she said. As the appeals hearing neared, Emma carried the weight of 3 years' work, her father's memory, Marcus Thompson's freedom, and the hope that one determined child could stand against the most powerful criminal network in her city. The stage was set. Emma Martinez, 12 years old, armed with evidence bought at the cost of her father's life, was about to step into court to confront a system that would do anything to protect itself. The appeals courtroom loomed like a fortress, its marble and oak meant to intimidate anyone daring to challenge the system. When 13-year-old Emma Martinez pushed open the heavy doors for Marcus Thompson's hearing, she carried not only a leather briefcase of meticulously organized evidence, but the weight of 3 years' work and a man's freedom. In her navy suit, bought specially for this day, she walked past rows packed with journalists and spectators drawn by the spectacle, a child challenging a murder conviction. Judge Patricia Hawthorne, stern and skeptical, wasted no time. It is unusual for this court to hear evidence presented by a minor. We will evaluate it with appropriate scrutiny. District Attorney Robert Morrison opened with a calculated strike. This case is the result of a traumatized child's conspiracy theories. We sympathize with her loss, but fantasies cannot overturn a lawful conviction. Emma had expected this. When she took the podium, her voice was calm, deliberate. Your Honors, I am here not as a grieving daughter, but as an investigator. My analysis will prove Mr. Thompson's innocence, identify the real killer, and expose a conspiracy at the highest levels of our city. She rolled out a timeline, security logs showing Thompson leaving the building at 10:31 p.m., bus records placing him miles away at 10:47, making the prosecution's showed the victim had trusted his killer, someone like Vincent Carlisle, not a stranger. Judge Williams asked how she'd learned this. Emma cited advanced university coursework, forensic consultants who'd reviewed her work. Then came the pattern analysis. 17 similar cases nationwide, all targeting civil rights attorneys investigating corporate corruption, each pinned on a convenient suspect. She explained confirmation bias, how investigators fixated on Thompson and ignored contradictory evidence. Finally, the blow no one could dismiss. DNA from a button recovered by Detective Foster's canine, mapped to Carlisle. This proves Carlisle was at the scene the night of my father's murder. The test was deliberately delayed until after Thompson's conviction. The room erupted. Morrison objected. Judge Hawthorne cut him off. Foster took the stand, admitting political pressure had crippled the original investigation. Emma Martinez's analysis is more thorough than ours was. Emma showed financial records, fraudulent contracts, bribes, eliminated witnesses. My father was killed to stop his testimony from exposing this network. By the time she finished, Morrison's challenges sounded hollow. The packed courtroom sat stunned. A 13-year-old had dismantled a high-profile conviction and laid bare a citywide conspiracy. Her closing was both precise and personal. 3 years ago, I was a 9-year-old who'd lost her father. Today, I've shown this court that Marcus Thompson is innocent, and that Vincent Carlisle murdered my father to protect a criminal enterprise. Justice delayed is justice denied, but it's never too late to correct a wrong. The judges recessed for only 30 minutes. When they returned, Hawthorne addressed Emma directly. This court has never encountered a more persuasive appeal. You've revealed not only proof of innocence, but systemic failure. The verdict: Thompson's conviction overturned, immediate release ordered. Judge Chen referred Emma's corruption evidence to federal authorities. An arrest warrant for Carlisle was issued on the spot. In the back, officers freed Thompson from shackles. His eyes met Emma's, brimming with gratitude. Foster approached. You haven't just freed a man, you've made the system better. Emma left the courthouse with her mother, knowing her father would be proud. She had honored his memory, freed an innocent man, and brought a killer to justice. Not through authority, exposing a $50 million fraud and a pattern of eliminating witnesses. He admitted framing Marcus Thompson through corrupt police and prosecutors because Thompson was a convenient scapegoat. Emma's work uncovered 17 other victims tied to the Meridian construction conspiracy, including 12 murders over 7 years. Her analysis became the template for prosecutors, revealing her father had been closer than anyone realized to dismantling the entire criminal network. David Martinez was posthumously honored as a hero, while Emma was recognized for her investigative role. The investigation expanded, taking down the mayor, police chief, city council members, and dozens of officials. Emma's pursuit of justice had not only freed Marcus Thompson, but dismantled entrenched corruption and prevented future crimes. Thompson's release after 5 years of wrongful imprisonment was bittersweet. Meeting Emma, he thanked her for believing in him when no one else did. She responded that he shouldn't have needed her intervention if the system had worked properly. Thompson received compensation, expungement, and formal acknowledgement of prosecutorial misconduct, then dedicated himself to criminal justice reform, funding investigations and advocating for safeguards against wrongful convictions. The city implemented sweeping reforms, an independent homicide review protocol, external oversight for politically sensitive cases, protections for whistleblowers, and a cold case unit led by Detective Foster, using Emma's methods to re-examine past convictions. Emma's approach gained national attention, influencing legal education and inspiring citizen review panels empowered to commission independent investigations. Her age and outsider status, once seen as disqualifications, became proof that determination and objectivity could rival institutional authority. By the end, Emma had achieved more than solving her father's murder and freeing an innocent man. She had reformed a flawed system, ensuring evidence-driven justice and insulating investigations from political pressure. Her legacy would protect future victims and prevent wrongful convictions, proving that individuals can challenge and improve entrenched institutions. Emma Martinez's transformation from an 8-year-old grieving daughter into a national symbol of determination and justice was swift. Following Marcus Thompson's exoneration and Vincent Carlisle's arrest, her story exploded across national media, framed not just as a criminology curricula. Training programs began teaching her methods. Publishers and filmmakers pursued her for books and documentaries. Invitations poured in from schools, law enforcement conferences, and civic organizations. Emma balanced her public role with normal teenage life, setting boundaries and prioritizing school, friends, and privacy, something her mother Maria encouraged to preserve her childhood. Her relationship with Detective Foster evolved into an active mentorship. Working part-time with Foster's new cold case unit, Emma applied her analytical approach to other questionable convictions. Partnered with Foster and Canine Titan, she became part of an investigative team whose combined skills uncovered patterns others had missed. Emma received letters from across the country, families of the missing, the wrongfully convicted, victims of unsolved crimes, seeking her help. Unable to take every case, she created a selection process and began teaching others her methods. This led to the founding of the David Martinez Foundation for Criminal Justice Reform, funding analytical investigations, supporting families, and advocating systemic change. Her work expanded beyond individual cases. She addressed audiences about the relationship between intelligence and moral courage, echoing her father's teachings. Being smart isn't enough. One must care enough to act. She showed that outsiders, unbound by institutional thinking, could see what insiders missed. Through education in criminology, forensics, and law, she deepened her skills with the awareness that knowledge must be applied to real problems. Her ongoing partnership with Foster's unit and foundation work gave her an enduring mission, applying systematic, detail-focused investigation to cases where truth and justice needed a determined advocate. Emma's journey inspired other young people to engage in civic life and challenge institutional failures. Her legacy, built on analytical skill, moral courage, and relentless determination, proved that age and credentials were no barrier to meaningful impact. By the time she looked toward her future, Emma carried the satisfaction of knowing her father's death had not been in vain, that Thompson was free, and that a criminal network had been dismantled. She would continue making a difference, one case at a time, as a living example that sometimes the most important reforms come from individuals willing to ask the hard questions and pursue the truth at any cost. Throughout Emma's extraordinary journey, remarkable ability to sense truth, reminded us why dogs have earned their place as humanity's most trusted companions. German Shepherds, with their noble hearts and fierce loyalty, exemplify the profound bond that can exist between humans and animals, a connection built on mutual respect, unconditional love, and shared purpose. If you've been blessed with a German Shepherd or any beloved dog in your life, you understand this magic. Perhaps you've wondered how to deepen that special connection, to truly understand the incredible mind behind those knowing eyes. There's something beautiful I'd love to share with you, a way to explore that bond more deeply. It feels like a conversation worth having.